This is the Radio Button Network. And this is the new Ace at Large podcast. Now, your host, Ace.
And here's the problem. And here's the problem that I have as a person. We had a great idea last week. I was very excited about the new Ace at Large podcast. It's the follow-up that makes it rather odd, that can cause some tension and nervousness on my part. This is the new Ace at Large podcast. And if you have been familiar with the Ace at Large podcast in the past, what I used to call the frantic rantings of a lunatic madman, unless I'm right, and here I'm always right, we've kind of done away with that. As we talked about last week, if you missed it, after the death of my daughter, now just over 3 months ago, I just felt the need to share with people because there's been such an outpouring of love and support for me and my family and from our friends and members of the Ace and TJ Radio family. Literally thousands upon thousands of people have reached out to say nice things, to send cards, to make donations to Peyton's Promise, to charity, and so much more, that I began to wonder what happens to other people who don't have all of this, who suffer the same type of tragic event in their lives, who don't have the good fortune of being in the position that I am in to receive this much love and affection from all these other people and this much support, because it's been a tremendous help to me and my entire family. Yet still, it's a really hard time. And that's kind of the genesis, the beginning of the new Ace at Large podcast. And what we're here to do every week is remind people that whatever it is that you're going through, whatever it is that you're dealing with, you are not alone. That there are so many other people dealing with the same thing that you are, because we all experience the same things just in different ways. And hopefully this is the place that you can come and learn a little something, have a few laughs, have a good time, and also find out that whatever it is that you're experiencing, you're not the only person going through it in life. There are other people, and maybe even find some coping mechanisms along the way. To that end, the simple fact that 2020 has been one of the craziest years ever, probably the craziest, worst year of a lot of people's lives. For most people, their world has been turned completely upside down, and people are dealing with anxiousness. People are dealing with stresses they've never dealt with before. People are dealing with depression like they've never known before. Being shut up in a house all the time like we have been for so long has caused a whole different set of problems that we never had to deal with before in our lives. How do we deal with that? What do we do? How do we make our lives better? How do we understand that everybody else is dealing with some of the same stuff and use that information to make ourselves begin to feel better? Because ultimately, it comes down to us. We are responsible for our own well-being, and we are responsible for taking actions to make ourselves better. What do we do? Well, that's kind of what we're going to tackle today on the new Ace at Large podcast. I've got a special guest coming up who's somewhat of an expert on the topic because she has dealt with all of this stuff in a variety of ways in the past. It's somebody that I know, and I thought, well, here's somebody that might be able to offer some assistance. And again, as I've pointed out before, I'm not a therapist. I've just been through a lot of therapy. I don't claim to have all the answers. All I have is personal experiences. But maybe we can all make our day and our week and the rest of our year a little bit better if we just hang out for a while and listen to each other and have this shared experience. So we'll do that next on the new Ace at Large podcast.
This is the new Ace at Large podcast. This is the Radio Button Network. And this is the new Ace at Large podcast.
So let's face it, these are very uncertain times for all of us right now. Now, I think, personally, they've been more uncertain through the course of the earlier months of the year, maybe through the summer months, because I know I, for one, am guilty of when the pandemic first began. I had a trip planned in June with my son, our annual baseball trip. This year we were supposed to go to Chicago and see the Chicago White Sox. We had a 4-day trip planned in summer during what was the first vacation for the Ace and TJ show. We take 2 weeks in the summer, split up every year. And I told him in March when this all started, I think we'll be fine. I think it'll be okay. By the end of June, it's not even going to be a problem. This thing will be gone by then. Clearly, I had no understanding whatsoever of what we were dealing with. Not that anybody else did at the time either. But I thought, then it became, well, in July, during our second vacation, Amanda and I were supposed to go to Costa Rica on this trip that we'd kind of found, this really cool Airbnb that was super cheap in Costa Rica. And I was like, it's July. It's late July. Everything will be fine. Well, guess what? We didn't go on that either because the country of Costa Rica didn't reopen until August 1st, the first week of August. So we missed out on that. I could not have fathomed in March that we would still be dealing with this now, but we are. And it has been troublesome for a ton of people in a variety of ways. So on the phone with me, this is my friend Casey. Hey, Casey, welcome to the new Ace at Large podcast. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
Great. So I set this up a minute ago by saying that I believe that through everything that's happened this year, hopefully we can all begin to improve ourselves, because ultimately I believe that it's up to each and every one of us to make our world a little bit better on a day-to-day basis. But we can do this by knowing, A, we're not alone in our feelings and the things that we're experiencing throughout the course of this year. And B, maybe listening to some other people who are experiencing the same things and finding out how they're coping, learning some tricks, learning some interesting things that maybe we didn't know or hadn't thought of that might help us to cope with our situation. And through sharing like this, we can all get better. So this has been a tough year for everybody. Obviously, there's the pandemic. Take my situation, for example, which is kind of how this whole podcast started. After the death of my daughter, I wanted to do something special, kind of in her honor and to help other people who are experiencing the kind of stuff that I was experiencing. Add to that the fact that we've had this crazy roller coaster of a political year that's brought on its own stresses and everything, the civil unrest that we've experienced. And it makes for a really anxious, just an anxious time for so many people, a really depressing time for a lot of people. And you've been pretty open with the things that you've dealt with, but you've dealt with anxiety and depression even before all of this, right?
Yeah, I was diagnosed officially with, anxiety, general anxiety disorder and depression when I was a teenager. So even under the best of circumstances and in the best of times, that's something that I often deal with.
Yeah. So here's a question, though, as we kind of get into this. A lot of people say, well, I've got anxiety, or I've got this, or I've got that. Explain exactly, because you actually been diagnosed by a doctor. I think it's a term a lot of people kind of throw around, but they don't really know what they're talking about, or they don't really know the technical definition. How does that manifest itself for you? When you say I have anxiety, or a doctor has noted that you have anxiety, what does that mean for you?
I think the most thing that makes it different from, people feeling anxious about, specific scenarios is sometimes my anxiety, I'll have an anxiety attack brought on by seemingly nothing, and feel like you've got like that weight on your chest, and, you have the shortness of breath and a panic attack, anxiety attack, whatever you want to use it, whatever term you want to use. And sometimes it's just so frustrating because it's a physical feeling, and everything's fine, seemingly, and I can't really explain why I'm suddenly so uptight and so upset. So that's really frustrating. So add to it actual circumstances that are stressful, such as this year and everything, and, it exacerbates it. It makes it more frequent to deal with.
Here's the interesting thing, too. For people around you, that can be very frustrating because, and I've never really talked about this before, but my daughter was diagnosed she was dealing with anxiety and depression. And I can remember she would have these anxiety attacks or call me and say, hey, what are you doing? And I could tell something was wrong. And she was, I'm just having a bad morning with my anxiety. And there would be literally no reason. And she would say, I don't know. I don't have a reason. I just feel really anxious. I'm having a shortness of breath and all that kind of stuff. And you would have to stay on the phone with her and talk to her. And at first it was hard to understand what she was experiencing because it didn't seem to make any sense. It was like, she admits there's no reason for this. So what has this year been like for you? Has it just been a roller coaster of emotion, or, with being closed in for a while and all this kind of stuff? What's it been like for you?
I'm sure my experience has been similar to most of ours. I'm very fortunate in that I have family nearby. So even though I live alone, during the quarantine and stuff like that, I was able to go and stay with my parents because isolation, when you're dealing with anxiety is sometimes a trigger. And that was really beneficial for me to be able to surround myself with loved ones, also who understand and get, when I have those anxious episodes and it can manifest itself in weird ways. It can just be snips of irritability. It doesn't have to be a full-blown panic attack. So I dealt, it was all unprecedented. I hate that word now because it's used so often. But I managed. I was fortunate in that I kept my job. So I was able to continue working and keep an income. So I feel a lot less stressed than maybe, a lot of other people did. So, I think the election and everything like that, that's obviously added some triggers. There's so much upsetting news and stuff like that. But, I get through. I do have medicine that I take, so that's helpful. But in terms of coping mechanisms, if we're getting to that, I actually deactivated Facebook not that long ago, a couple months ago. I like to stay informed, and I think that that's important, that we all stay informed, but constantly feeding my brain with too much bad news and negative energy and commentary that I don't believe in or agree with that, seems obscene to me is so toxic and so unhealthy and gets my blood pressure rising. So limiting that has been
out of curiosity, why Facebook and not Twitter or other forms of social media? Is there a reason, a philosophy there as to why one and not the others?
Yeah, so Twitter, I'm able to kind of procure my feed a bit more. You can actually mute words and phrases so that they don't appear in your feed at all. It's easier to follow and unfollow people, and I hate that. I kind of feel like I've created a bit of an echo chamber for myself in terms of, my political views, but I get validated, and I'm not seeing a ton of like crazy off the wall opinions that are so contradictory to mine,
right.
Or angry people. You know what I mean?
Sure. Absolutely. Because Twitter's a sewer for angry people. It's a mess.
Yeah. Instagram's a lot more, about the aesthetic, and it's a little bit more surface level. Facebook is just, you're swarmed with not just your family and friends, but the people that are commenting on their posts. It's really difficult to, adjust that and make it your own and censor what you see.
How often do you because I think social media is one of the big problems when it comes to this now, is if we didn't have enough pressures or whatever, we all gravitate to social media to look for things and to be informed and just to kind of check out the world, so to speak. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have, is that, like, you did a really smart thing. You found a way to kind of remove yourself from the situation a great deal, but still find a way to stay informed. How often do you just walk away, period? Like, this weekend, I'm not at all going to look at this, or for how many days the next week, I'm not even going to put any social media on my phone, that kind of thing. Do you do that very often?
Not often enough. I'll do it for a day type of thing. I think it comes down to being a, technology addicted millennial. Right. I need to be more disciplined,
sure.
Because it does feel so good to, not even just social media, but just put your phone down in general and live life and not be worrying about texting and keeping up with, whatever app or what have you. And I love those days when I do that. I opt to do it more frequently.
All right, you just used a good word that I just made a note because I think it's important. You use the word discipline, whether it's with social media or just things that help you cope. How important is discipline? Because to me, I find I need the discipline of going to the gym on a daily basis, because if nothing else, that allows me to, I turn music on and focus on whatever it is that I'm doing for a while. And the only TVs in the gym are on sports. And which even now, if you're trying to escape politics, it pops up on ESPN all the time on the crawl across the bottom or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that discipline of doing that is important. That discipline of trying to schedule a time to have dinner with my son and make certain, hey, let's sit down and just talk about life. And those are things that help me cope quite often with the loss of the year and that kind of thing. So how important to you is discipline when it comes to helping you deal with everything?
It's super important, but it's also something that I struggle with and constantly have to, get on myself about. I know that going on a long walk, a fast-paced walk and getting my heart rate up with my dog on a nice day will make me feel better. But if I'm in, what I would consider kind of a depressive episode and I can't pry myself off the couch. And so it's tough. So I really am working on manifesting that discipline to utilize the tools that I have to that I know help. For example, like the Calm app, which is kind of some self-guided guided meditation, is a great resource. I kind of rolled my eyes at it and didn't want to make time for it. And when I do, I feel so much better. So it's one of those things that, I think creating a routine is super healthy and just makes you feel like you've got control over something.
Yeah. And are there things you go to just to take your mind off of it? I'll give you an example. I'm practically a YouTube addict. I think YouTube may be one of the 5 greatest things ever invented in life because I can find any old concert that I want to seem to find just to kind of get lost in something that you find entertaining for a while. And God knows I've gone down the rabbit hole of, like we were talking about earlier, the 10 creepiest things ever to happen on live TV, which takes you to the 10 creepiest places on Earth, which takes you to the 10 weirdest places people have ever flown into with a plane or whatever the hell it is. You go down that rabbit hole of, I've been here 3 hours looking at this stuff. Are there things that you do like that? You mentioned walking with your dog, whatever, that okay, I'm not feeling good. I need to make a move to get myself out of this. And that you turn to these certain things? Is it reading? Is it music? Is it what?
It can be a bunch of things. This weekend, these past few days, I've had a Harry Potter movie marathon because it's nostalgic for me and makes me happy.
Yeah.
So everybody's got their thing that kind of makes them sort of recede a little bit into childhood and feel like remind you of a safer time, a less stressful time. So old movies and definitely reading books, any kind of escape like that, listening to music while I'm walking the dog or blaring music in my condo while I'm cleaning the place, stuff like that. I hate to say that it's, a distraction, but distracting yourself from, scary reality at times is necessary.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. And last thing before you go, because first off, thank you, because not a lot of people would come on and admit that they've been dealing with these types of things. And, not a lot of people would be willing to put themselves out there the way you are doing today just to try to help other people. But for those people who may be listening right now, and whether they're dealing with alcoholism in the family or the death of a loved one or just the general anxiety and fear and restlessness that goes with being alive in 2020, what is the thing you would say to them that's important to always remember because it's going to help them get through the difficult times? Is there one thing that you would say or a piece of advice you would give to them that they can always count on to help them?
I'm realizing in those darkest moments when I'm having, the worst thoughts and I'm so upset and I feel like the world's ending, in those moments, I have to remind myself that my feelings are valid and, if in a certain situation, but they're also like, how do I explain? How you feel is valid, but a lot of the time it's your brain kind of tricking you into over-exaggerating a situation or what have you. And the biggest thing I think is that you're not alone in how you feel. I think so many people, and I don't know if it's because we're in this technology age and things are just going faster, I know so many people with anxiety and or depression diagnoses. So, I'm not unique in that by any means. And I think that even those that don't have the diagnosis medically are dealing with certain symptoms of that just due to the fact that we are in such a weird kind of, what I would say is a bit of a dark time right now in our nation's history and everything, and in the world. So just know you're not alone. It's one resource that I would recommend to people. If you do have a job and it's available to you as a benefit as an employee, my company has an employee assistance program that is available to me and any member of my household, and it's free. It's a free resource. You can get a therapist and go to them for 6 sessions for free to discuss any issues that might arise in particular. And if you're in need of longer term care, they can refer you to those specialists. It's been really invaluable at a couple different times that I've utilized it.
Yeah.
And
just
if
talking
you've got
about
that available to you, do it.
Yeah, there's a weird thing about, and I think it's a weird thing, an unusual thing, that how the human body and mind work in conjunction with just the simple fact of saying the words out loud to someone and getting them out feels like it pushes something out of your body. It sounds weird. I know it sounds weird, and I'm not.
No, you're completely right.
Yeah, it's something I learned when I started going to therapy, is that saying the words to another human, especially someone that you trust, that you can just get this stuff out. There's a physical transformation that goes with that, of getting the words out and having them. It's like when they leave your body, it takes a little bit of that with it as it goes away. And I think talking about it with someone is super important. Casey, thank you so much. I appreciate the fact that you were willing to come on and just try to help somebody. Yeah. It was a privilege, and thanks for taking the time to be on with us.
We're all in this together. Take care, Ace. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Take care, Casey.
Okay, sounds good. Bye.
So here's the thing. I made a few notes as we went through, just a couple of things to remind everybody of. And one of the things that I have trouble remembering personally, and much of this stuff will fall into the category of things that I would recommend that I don't actually do, which I'm not proud of, but I'm being honest with you. That's fact of life. There are a couple of things here that are very important, and something that my mom always reminded me. Number one, you are in charge of what happens to you in your life and how you handle situations. And it's something I tell my kids all the time. You know, it's the same philosophy as when one kid does something and you're getting on to the kid and say, well, so-and-so did this. And no, that's not important. We're dealing with you and your situation and how you are handling your situation. That we all are in charge of our situations on some level. And in this, if you're feeling anxious, sad, depressed, restless, at its core, item number one is the fact that we are in charge of that. And that means you've got to take steps to make it better. You can't just do nothing. Because if you do nothing, nothing is going to change. Somehow, some way, even though we know we don't feel like it, we have to do something to take a step to make ourselves feel better. Whether it's getting up and going for a walk. You heard Casey talk about the fact that she knows when she gets up and goes for a walk with her dog and plays loud music, it makes her feel better, but some days she just don't feel like it. There are a lot of days I just don't feel like going to the gym. But even if it's to go to the gym and just ride the stationary bike for 30 minutes and break a sweat, that makes a huge difference in my day. And I have to remind myself, no, I'm going to need to go at least do this and see how I feel afterwards. So number one, we are in charge on some level of how we handle all of these situations. Number two, the discipline to do the things that you know work. Make yourself do what you know works and try to factor those things in every single day. And number three, we have to know what our escapes are and feel free to run to them from time to time when you need them. Those escapes are whatever it is that takes your mind out of wherever it is that gives you so much trouble. Whether you are like me and get lost in watching Guns N' Roses live from the Ritz in 1988 on YouTube, or going down the rabbit hole of literally the biggest sinkholes that have ever formed on the planet Earth, I highly recommend the Top 10 Sinkholes video. It's pretty amazing. And you will forget all about whatever it is that ails you, so to speak, when you get lost down that rabbit hole. Even conspiracy theories sometimes can be dangerous, but rather interesting to make you stop thinking about whatever it is that you're thinking about. So, more than anything, I hope that through the course of the day today, while discussing these things, you realize that you're not by yourself. I'm not here to preach to anybody, and we're going to be doing different things every week, and sometimes they're going to be fun, and sometimes they're going to be sad, and we're going to talk to a lot of different people, and we're still kind of figuring out how this thing is going to go. But remember from today, those key things. One, you're not alone. You're not the only person feeling the way you're feeling. Number two, you are in charge. Number three, discipline. Make yourself do what you know works for you, as long as it's not drugs. And number 4, know your escapes and feel free to escape to them. Run to your escapes every now and then, just to kind of help yourself get out of whatever it is that you're in. Amanda sent me a text a little while ago. And I think this is important for each one of us, especially as we get older, especially as we have kids, or if you're planning to have kids one day, because these are the things, these are the lessons that we will learn, that we will pass down to our kids, to our brothers and sisters, to our friends and family, that will help them. It's a great quote, and I wish I could tell you who said it, but I don't know. She just sent me a little picture. And the picture says, "One day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through now. And it will become part of someone else's survival guide." One day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through now, and it will become part of someone else's survival guide. What you're going through now is going to help someone else get better. And there's really not much more we could ask. Not much more we could do that would be great than knowing that you're helping someone else. This whole thing started because of what I was going through, what I've been going through, what my family is going through after my daughter's death. And the fact that somehow, some way, a little bit of that becomes part of someone else's survival guide means that my daughter didn't die for nothing. And I hope somehow, some way, that today, a little bit of piece of this, a little something has resonated with you and made your day a little bit better. And maybe you can go make somebody else's day a little bit better because of it. I'll see you next week.
This is the new Ace at Large podcast.